So what is freedom? I know for sure during these wild COVID times, it feels like our freedoms are being challenged and people are up in arms about defending these freedoms. There's a lot of debate on how we should show up with what we choose to do with our own bodies, our own health, how to respond to harsh governmental policies, the economy, etc., etc., etc. Now, this is my shamanic perspective on all of this. To get a wider understanding of freedom, it's important to understand the energy of freedom from 4 different levels of consciousness. The Kara shamans, the last living descendants of the Inca, which is the lineage that I'm initiated into, view the world from 4 different perspectives through the medicine wheel and the 4 cardinal directions. And in viewing life in this way, we're able to zoom in through a microscope or zoom out with a telescope to understand this idea of freedom a little bit more clearly. The first perspective is connected to the archetypal energies of the South through Mother Serpent, which is very much about the material world. Serpent slithers belly to earth, sticking her tongue out to listen for threats in her physical environment. She has this heightened sense of awareness of the material world because she's on guard. It's all about life or death. It's about protection. So when we look at freedom from a material perspective, we're looking at it from the understanding that freedom is about getting free from something. Kind of like the American Declaration of Independence, where it's emphasized that the purpose of the nation is to uphold the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Now remember, when the 13 colonies fought for freedom, it was freedom from the British Empire. And this is the foundational understanding of freedom, that it's breaking away from this external entity that is oppressing our free will. The second perspective is connected to the archetypal energies of the West through Sister Jaguar. Jaguar travels high up into the mountains and she hunts along the river. And also she plays deep in the swamplands, which represent the 3 different levels of consciousness. The mountains representing our conscious and higher nature, the rivers representing our subconscious and emotional world and belief structures, and then the swamplands representing the unconscious shadow within, this vast unknown potential that connects us to the collective dream. Carl Jung called this the unconscious collective, where our access points to gifts from former lifetimes and the wisdom of all of humanity is hidden. When we contemplate freedom from this perspective, it is all about our mental and emotional beliefs. It's about our values around freedom. It's the mind-feeling loop. You might start to create a pro and a con sheet in your head as to what you gain and what you lose when you have to choose between 2 sides. When we're trapped in the mind games of duality, we perceive that freedom is only black and white. You have to either be a capitalist or a communist, a religious devotee or some sacrilegious heathen. You have to be only pro-life or you're pro-choice, pro-vax or anti-vax. But we know that on a higher level, there are more than just 2 choices. Freedom isn't a chess game with only black and white pieces. The Jaguar perspective is about taking your inner hunter instinct and tracking deep into the unconscious shadow and the higher parts of self to assess what actually is underlying your perception of freedom. It's about digging into the origins of your beliefs. The key word here is belief. Beliefs are fickle. Beliefs are like clothes. You can change them as often as you'd like. And just like fashion, they'll never be agreed on because it's subjective. You might think what I'm wearing is completely ugly, right? I might think it's beautiful. You might think that by taking away my freedom, let's say to own a gun, it's better for the well-being of society. But let's say I see it as you're interfering with my family's legacy of hunters who always had the freedom to bear arms. So for you, your idea of freedom is centered around a non-violent society, and then maybe my idea of freedom is around maintaining my family legacy and my freedom to choose. All movements of change, civil rights movements, environmental movements, political movements, religious movements, they all happen because there's so much conviction in a set of beliefs that eventually conflict has to emerge. The Jaguar perception of freedom is where most of our cultural and societal change takes place. Now let's look at the third perspective of freedom, which is connected to the archetypal energies of the North through Hummingbird. Hummingbird overcomes the limitations of fate and is the master of destiny. If you look at a hummingbird, they have these tiny little wings, and they can beat up to 90 times a second depending on what species. And they travel hundreds of miles on these large migration patterns across South, Central, and North America against all the odds. They have these tiny little wings that look like they weren't even designed to fly great distances, but they do it anyway, because the medicine of hummingbird is all about saying, yes, I can, because a higher power is moving through me. So when we talk about freedom from this perspective, we're not looking at it from down in the jungle where snake and jaguar are. We're looking at it from a more zoomed out lens. We're looking at the big picture and surrendering to the divine intelligence at play. We move away from this is what I believe, to it doesn't matter what I believe anymore, because my beliefs are a function of my ego wanting to preserve the familiar. Hummingbird is here to help us break out of the karmic loop. Hummingbird understands that the trap of having to take a side keeps you trapped in the karmic washing machine. So Hummingbird's definition of freedom is very similar actually to the yogic concept of moksha, or the emancipation from suffering. So then the questions you ask about freedom will be less about what you believe freedom is, but rather what difficult choices will you have to make to transcend the karmic loop of suffering. This requires surrender, surrendering all the statistical left brain information, the logical reasoning that you've created in your mind and crystallized into your emotional body as this stubborn, it's my way or the highway energy. This has to dissolve, because if it doesn't, you stay caught in the spider's web of duality down in the jungle with Jaguar. The freedom that Hummingbird is concerned with is about seeing the truth beyond the illusion. The yogis called it a lila, or the cosmic game that our souls have all elected to be a part of. And Hummingbird understands that our souls are all wearing temporary skins, playing a specific part in this big cosmic play. And when you approach freedom from that point of view, whatever choice you make, it's the right choice, because it no longer comes from a place of fear, guilt, or shame. You don't have to defend your views on freedom, because going on the defensive would continue feeding the karmic illusion. The fourth perspective is connected to the archetypal energies of the East through eagle. Eagle is the bridge. Eagle is the connector between the material realms and the higher realms, or the world of the invisible, the world of energy, the world of the inarticulable, the unknowable. Eagle is truly free because not only can they fly wherever they want to go, into the heights of the clouds or down into the rivers to hunt for salmon or whatever. Eagle is free because they have illumined vision, not just vision into the future, but their vision can pierce through the pattern of creation, the very nature of reality. They see that at the end of it all, everyone and everything will return to spirit no matter what choice they make. The understanding of freedom from this perspective is that there is no free will to consider when making a choice, because free will implies a separation from source, that we are separate from source, which is not true. To attain spiritual freedom from this level, it's what is known as making the choiceless choice, because we are divinely perfect in all that we are. What choice is there to make? A piece of the divine lives within us, and we live within the divine. All is perfect, even if on the outside it seemingly seems imperfect. So freedom up here is very different from freedom in the jungle with Serpent and Jaguar. The relative truths of a trigger-happy gun supporter or a righteous anti-vaxxing martyr has no sway here. And also on this perspective, there is harmony and union between the seemingly disparate and opposing sides. There is the understanding that each person is playing a uniquely divine part in the cosmic puzzle. So all choices are right, no matter how disastrous they may seem to be. Freedom from the level of eagle is the ultimate practice of compassion, an embracing of polar opposite views. True freedom is the embrace of the paradox that there is no enemy out to trip us up. It just appears that way. So with the hummingbird and eagle perspectives on freedom, the function of freedom is no longer about being released from some external force that holds us captive, because we see that Spirit created me and you. Spirit also created what I might be resisting or what you might be resisting. True freedom, or moksha, is realizing that there is nothing to resist or fight against. Because the four directions of the medicine wheel is circular and non-linear, we can bounce around from the various four viewpoints. Some days you may pop down into Jaguar land and take up a cause and rally, and on some days you might be in full surrender to the divine and realize the silliness of the fight. We are not meant to stay static in one perspective, nor are we meant to judge ourselves if we are only stuck on one level of consciousness for a period of time. All we need to do is simply bring awareness to where we are, and in doing so, we invite a shift into a different level of relating to ourselves and also to all the events that are happening around us. There isn't a right or wrong way, and no perspective is better than the other. Each perspective serves their own function. It's a matter of if you're considering freedom from conditioned patterns of fear or from a well-rounded view of all the possibilities. So I invite you to consider what your relationship with freedom is right now. Are you attached to certain ways of comfort and familiarity and are writing that off as defending your personal freedoms? Or are you willing to step beyond what you think you know and allow the bigger picture to inform your decisions and ultimately for something new to emerge?